This is the Black River Basin? The three Voidwalkers had already descended at the Black River Basin. All of them were powerful Voidwalkers. They just purchased information from the meteor tower. The number of powerful origin beasts in the Black River Basin seemed to have decreased greatly due to the Great Battle 300 years ago. They also wanted to take a risk and kill powerful origin beasts to obtain powerful spacetime crystals. However, by the time they arrived at the Black River Basin, they saw that it was bare, save for a black river. As for the shore, it was as if it had been completely razed to the ground. Everyone could tell at a glance how devastating the battle back then was. El heard that the origin beasts at the bottom of the Black River are enemies with the origin beasts on the shore. The battle was very intense. Even many powerful origin beasts fell. That's right, but this is also our opportunity. If the three of us join forces to attack a powerful origin beast, we're still confident about winning. Three powerful Voidwalkers could only suppress one powerful origin beast, and just an ordinary powerful origin beast. It was completely impossible to kill it. Their strength had not reached the point where they could kill powerful origin beasts alone. There's a powerful origin beast there. I think it's in the valley. Then attack. Be careful. The three of them quickly approached the powerful origin beast. However, only after approaching did they realize that it was not a powerful origin beast. There were clearly dozens of them. How can there be so many powerful origin beasts? This is impossible. This is bad. We've been discovered. The three powerful Voidwalkers were originally very cautious. However, those powerful origin beasts also had their own special abilities, so they sensed that there were three of them. The powerful origin beasts were furious. 300 years ago, a Voidwalker had actually offended their holy item, and even seized a portion of it before all their eyes. The origin beasts could not forget it until now. In the end, both parties even fought a huge battle, and they suffered heavy losses. They would not forget that damned Voidwalker. But now, there were actually Voidwalkers spying on them from the side again. These origin beasts were immediately enraged. Gore! Dozens of powerful origin beasts roared wildly, and their auras immediately locked onto the three powerful Voidwalkers. Immediately, the expressions of the three Voidwalkers changed. What were these? These were dozens of powerful origin beasts. Who could resist such a terrifying aura? However, the three of them were fleeing, not resisting it. Moreover, the three of them were already sufficiently prepared before coming to the Black River Basin. Swish! A circle of golden light enveloped the three of them at once. Immediately, the speed of the three of them increased tremendously. They transformed into a golden light and shook off the dozens of powerful origin beasts behind them. That was close. Fortunately, we were prepared. The three powerful Voidwalkers calmed down a little. At this moment, they were also cursing the meteor tower in their hearts. Didn't the intelligence from the meteor tower claim that the origin beasts in the Black River Basin had suffered heavy losses after a huge battle? Why were there still so many origin beasts now? Moreover, there were not one or two powerful origin beasts but dozens. Was this while the origin beasts had suffered heavy losses? If they had not sensed it and charged in, they would probably be doomed. Fortunately, they were lucky enough to escape in the end. Behind them, dozens of powerful origin beasts were still roaring. However, they could not catch up to their speed no matter what. They were still above the Black River. Looking at the pitch-black river below, their hearts suddenly palpitated. Something's wrong. One of the Voidwalkers had just spoken when the entire Black River seemed to shake at once. A huge wave swept out, and an incomparably huge head actually shot out from the bottom of the Black River. The three Voidwalkers looked at the giant origin beast in shock. Its head was incomparably huge, and even sucked them towards it directly. Boom! It was as if the world had fallen silent all of a sudden. A terrifying suction force swept over. In their shock, the three powerful Voidwalkers each used their peak origin supreme treasures. However, it seemed to be completely useless before this terrifying suction force. No, how is this possible? This is a peak origin beast. The intelligence of the meteor tower is wrong. The three Voidwalkers cried out in agony. Then they were swallowed by the giant origin beast in the Black River, before it sank to the bottom of the river. The group of origin beasts on the distant shore all had complicated expressions, and a trace of fear appeared in their eyes. Peak origin beast. A peak origin beast was actually born among the origin beasts at the bottom of the Black River. From now on, the Black River Basin would probably really belong to the origin beasts at the bottom of the Black River. Buzz. Suddenly, ripples spread out in the void, rippling continuously. Finally, a spaceship flew out of the void. Those origin beasts were all slightly stunned, then furious. They still remembered that it was this spaceship that had snatched a portion of the holy item from them 300 years ago. Now, this damned cultivator was actually here again? Lin Feng walked out of the void vessel. He glanced at the dozens of powerful origin beasts, then put away the void vessel. A peak origin beast? Lin Feng had actually arrived long ago. However, he sensed that there were 3 powerful voidwalkers, so he did not come out. Lin Feng naturally saw the scene just now. A peak origin beast had actually appeared at the bottom of the Black River. Moreover, Lin Feng was actually very familiar with the appearance of that peak origin beast. Wasn't it the massive origin beast he had seen in front of the huge tree at the bottom of the Black River back then? Back then, that origin beast had already far exceeded ordinary powerful origin beasts. Moreover, after consuming the strange fruit grown from the tree, the strength of the origin beast seemed to be enhanced. Unexpectedly, after nearly 300 years passed in the blink of an eye, that powerful origin beast from back then had actually grown into a peak origin beast. Even the meteor tower probably had not discovered this information. However, was Lin Feng still afraid of a peak origin beast now? Having comprehended the principle of the future, Lin Feng could actually already use space-time power. He could unleash at least 80% of the power of a peak origin supreme treasure. This was almost equivalent to unleashing all the power of a peak origin supreme treasure. Moreover, there was the space-time prison. Hence, Lin Feng did not know how strong he was at this moment either. However, he was certain that he should be very, very strong, at least stronger than ordinary peak voidwalkers. But now, this peak origin beast that had just advanced in front of him was just right for Lin Feng to test himself. Open! The blood flame lamp appeared in Lin Feng's hand. He suddenly activated the blood flame lamp. Even the space-time power was still enveloping the blood flame lamp, isolating it from the suppression of the space-time rule. Although it could not be completely isolated, it could allow the blood flame lamp to unleash at least 80% of its power. Boom! Blood-red flames illuminated half the sky. Terrifying flames enveloped the entire Black River at once, as if about to evaporate it entirely. If anyone saw this scene here, they would definitely be shocked. This was not just any ordinary river, but the Black River. Ordinary power could not penetrate the waters of the Black River, let alone evaporate it. This was even more impossible when surrounded by so many origin beasts. But now, as Lin Feng activated the blood flame lamp, terrifying flames enveloped the entire Black River. The temperature of the flames was extremely high, and the water of the Black River was actually declining at a visible speed. If this dragged on, Lin Feng might really be able to evaporate the entire Black River. Gore! The countless origin beasts in the Black River roared in fear. They wanted to stop Lin Feng, but even they would be burned to ashes under Lin Feng's blood flames. How could they stop Lin Feng? Even some powerful origin beasts felt the threat of death. They could only hide at the bottom of the river, not daring to show themselves. Lin Feng's dominance was evident. Boom! However, that peak origin beast at the bottom of the Black River would not sit back and do nothing. In fact, it was infuriated by Lin Feng's actions, and its massive body appeared again. Lin Feng's blood flame lamp was indeed incomparably powerful, but the other party was even stronger. In particular, in the Black River, it could even use the power of the Black River. Monstrous waves from the huge Black River extinguished Lin Feng's scarlet flames. At the same time, they surged towards Lin Feng. The terrifying power made even Lin Feng feel a trace of threat for a moment. However, it was only a trace of threat. Humph! 9-layered gloves. Lin Feng threw a punch. This time, it was the 9-layered gloves. This peak origin supreme treasure specialized in strength. The strength was unbelievable. The power contained in a single strike was incredible. In particular, now that Lin Feng had already comprehended the principle of the future and could even use space-time power, he was almost invincible. Moreover, he could unleash at least 80% of the power of a peak origin supreme treasure. 80% of the power of the 9-layered gloves was comparable to a peak voidwalker. Boom! With a punch, it was as if the entire Black River was crushed. A terrifying force descended from the sky, firmly suppressing the entire Black River. Even the peak origin beast was forcefully smashed into the Black River. Gore! The peak origin beast roared wildly and swept over again. Lin Feng merely threw another punch and smashed it into the bottom of the Black River. Once, twice, thrice. Lin Feng had only used 2 peak origin supreme treasures, but he had already firmly suppressed the peak origin beast. In reality, Lin Feng only wanted to test how strong he was in the battle just now. And just now, he already had a rough understanding. As for now, Lin Feng did not intend to continue testing anymore. It was time to end the battle. Myriad-layered pagoda. Lin Feng used the 3rd peak origin supreme treasure. He did not even use the space-time prison because there was no need at all. Right now, Lin Feng was too strong. Having comprehended the principle of the future, Lin Feng's strength had increased by more than 10 times, or even more than 100 times. Lin Feng had already tested his current strength. Even if he only used 1 peak origin supreme treasure alone, he could still suppress this peak origin beast. There was even less question when he was attacking with 3 peak origin supreme treasures together now. Rumble. As the myriad-layered pagoda descended, even the surrounding void seemed to be confined. The myriad-layered pagoda had the effect of confinement and suppression. Of course, it was far inferior to the effect of the space-time prison, but it was still rather extraordinary. Now that it could unleash 80% of its power, it instantly confined the struggling peak origin beast. Even though it was still struggling violently, it was useless. Right on the heels of that, Lin Feng's blood flame lamp and the 9-layered gloves took turns to attack the peak origin beast. Gradually, this peak origin beast also struggled to survive. Clearly, it was about to collapse. Being able to suppress a peak origin beast alone was already very impressive. But as for killing it, usually only the best voidwalkers could kill peak origin beasts alone. For example, top voidwalkers like the Spacetime Swordmaster could kill peak origin beasts alone. Back then, it was even rumored that the Spacetime Swordmaster had killed a peak origin beast with a single strike, shocking everyone in the origin gate. Lin Feng relied on the 3 peak origin supreme treasures to suppress this peak origin beast firmly. However, if he wanted to kill it, he would still have to take some time to wear it down. Time passed slowly. Finally, this peak origin beast could no longer hold out. It was instantly killed by Lin Feng's 9-layered gloves. Its massive body shattered, and its life force was exhausted. Peak origin beasts had an extremely powerful life force. Even though Lin Feng could already suppress peak origin beasts tightly without using the spacetime prison, he could only exhaust the life force of the peak origin beast bit by bit. Only then could he kill it. Of course, things would be different if he used the spacetime prison. Lin Feng's strongest method at the moment was undoubtedly the spacetime prison. In particular, now that he had comprehended the principle of spacetime and the principle of the future, the spacetime prison could unleash even more power. He even looked invincible once the spacetime prison was deployed. However, using the spacetime prison to deal with this peak origin beast seemed to be making a mountain out of a molehill. Lin Feng could kill this peak origin beast just by using his own strength. Retrieve. As this peak origin beast was killed, Lin Feng was unwilling to miss the corpse or trust peak origin beast. Alter all, it contained a huge amount or energy. The spacetime prison swept directly into it. After all, the spacetime prison seemed to be able to continue metamorphosing. However, the amount of energy required was simply incredible. This spacetime crystal seems to be different from ordinary spacetime crystals. Could it be a peak spacetime crystal? Lin Feng retrieved a spacetime crystal from the spacetime prison. This was the spacetime crystal that had appeared after killing this peak origin beast. It was rumored that there were ordinary spacetime crystals, powerful spacetime crystals, and peak spacetime crystals. Of course, there seemed to be some Overlord-level origin beasts whose bodies definitely contained stronger spacetime crystals. However, almost no one could kill such Overlord-level origin beasts, so they naturally did not know the miraculous use of the spacetime crystals contained. However, peak spacetime crystals could only be chanced upon by luck. They were practically priceless treasures. Even if they were obtained, no one would choose to sell them. Lin Feng was not in a hurry to experience this peak spacetime crystal. He looked at the valley on the shore. His goal was that golden flower in the valley. Swoosh! Lin Feng's figure flashed. In reality, the spacetime Pak, rare in his body, warped through the void directly. Even though there was still heavy suppression from the spacetime rule, it could not completely suppress Lin Feng's spacetime power. His current realm far exceeded that of ordinary peak voidwalkers. Lin Feng arrived outside the valley. There were also a large number of origin beasts densely packed here. However, the origin beasts that were aggressive previously kept retreating when they saw Lin Feng. They could only growl in an attempt to scare Lin Feng off. Clearly, they were afraid. These were all powerful origin beasts. Their intelligence was actually not much inferior to cultivators. Lin Feng had killed a peak origin beast forcefully. He believed that these origin beasts had already seen it. Facing Lin Feng, they would naturally feel fear. Lin Feng glanced at these powerful origin beasts. He was just about to try if his medium kiliocosm that had broken through its shackles could trap the powerful origin beasts. Hence, without any hesitation, he immediately attacked. Boom! The medium kiliocosm descended. Lin Feng instantly enveloped all the powerful origin beasts. That's right, not one or two, but all the powerful origin beasts outside the valley. There were about dozens of them, all of which were powerful origin beasts. In the past, this would be almost unthinkable. Lin Feng's medium kiliocosm might be instantly torn apart. However, Lin Feng's medium kiliocosm was no longer what it used to be. The dozens of powerful origin beasts were indeed very strong. They were also struggling violently. However, Lin Feng's medium kiliocosm was very powerful. Even if it was torn apart, it could quickly recover. Suppress! Lin Feng mobilized all the power in his medium kiliocosm in an attempt to suppress these powerful origin beasts. This did limit powerful origin beasts, but Lin Feng's medium kiliocosm was in turmoil. It might not be able to hold out for long or even for 10 breaths before collapsing completely. However, this was enough for Lin Feng. Forget about 10 breaths, even just one breath was enough. This was because Lin Feng had deployed the spacetime prison. In the medium kiliocosm, the spacetime prison had almost no restrictions. It was even more terrifying than a peak origin supreme treasure. With the appearance of the spacetime prison, those origin beasts could not cause mucka of a stir at all. In the next moment, they were suppressed by the spacetime prison. There are 38 powerful origin beasts? Lin Feng counted carefully and moved 38 powerful spacetime crystals out of the spacetime prison. This also meant that there were 38 powerful origin beasts outside the valley. Unfortunately, all these powerful origin beasts were instantly killed by Lin Feng using the spacetime prison. This also meant that Lin Feng's medium kiliocosm had broken its limit and its shackles. The strength was incredible. At the very least, restraining powerful origin beasts for a short period of time would not be a problem. This also meant that before the medium kiliocosm was broken, Lin Feng would be almost invincible. After all, even peak origin beasts could be easily killed by the spacetime prison. Only at this moment did Lin Feng realize how much his comprehension of the principle of spacetime would increase his overall strength. It was probably over 100 times. Of course, Lin Feng did not continue to slaughter. With Lin Feng's current strength, it was actually not difficult for him to slaughter all the origin beasts in the entire Black River Basin. However, Lin Feng's true goal this time was not even powerful spacetime crystals. He knew very well that at his current level of comprehension of the principle of the future, powerful spacetime crystals were actually not very useful anymore. At most, they would only increase his comprehension by a little more. His true goal was that golden flower. Lin Feng walked into the valley and saw the golden flower. Almost 300 years had passed, but the golden flower was still in the valley. However, the golden flower did not seem to be leaking any more golden liquid this time. It looked weak and showed faint signs of withering. It's not time yet? Lin Feng thought for a moment. Perhaps this was the only explanation. Otherwise, the area outside the valley would not just be filled with origin beasts on land. There would be origin beasts at the bottom of the Black River fighting with them. However, there was not a single beast from the bottom of the Black River. This meant that the golden liquid might not have flowed out of this golden flower yet. Lin Feng observed this flower carefully. When he returned to Hope City, he had actually investigated a lot of information. Unfortunately, there was no information on this golden flower. Even the meteor tower did not have any information on this golden flower. There were actually many unsolved mysteries, or rather many enigmas in the origin gate. The information the Voidwalkers knew might not even be 1/10 of what the origin gate contained. After all, the origin gate was the world of the origin beasts. The origin beasts were the true hegemons of the origin gate. Lin Feng observed for a long time, but still could not see anything special about this golden flower. He wanted to transplant it, but he was afraid of destroying the golden flower. In the end, Lin Feng simply guarded the valley quietly. In any case, the Black River Basin was not a threat to Lin Feng at all now. After 10 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years, in the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. Lin Feng did not find trouble with those origin beasts, but the origin beasts at the bottom of the Black River kept finding trouble with Lin Feng. In the end, in a fit of anger, Lin Feng went deep into the bottom of the Black River and swept through all the origin beasts, obtaining dozens of powerful space-time crystals. Lin Feng even ate the fruit of the strange tree, but it was not of much use to Lin Feng. The entire Black River Basin was no longer a threat. At the bottom of the river, although Lin Feng's strength was greatly suppressed, he could kill all powerful origin beasts just by relying on the space-time prison. Hence, Lin Feng continued to wait. About another 100 years passed. About 500 years had passed since Lin Feng last came to the Black River Basin. Finally, the golden flower began to become vibrant again. The flower bloomed, and rich golden liquid flowed out. Lin Feng was overjoyed. He moved this golden liquid directly into the medium kiliocosm, and even directly cultivated in the valley to expand his medium kiliocosm. This time, the amount of golden liquid Lin Feng obtained was dozens or even 100 times that of the first time. So much golden liquid immediately stimulated the medium kiliocosm. After the fusion began, the medium kiliocosm expanded wildly. The large amount of golden liquid was simply infinite. Lin Feng felt that he was breaking the limit of the medium kiliocosm at every moment. The medium kiliocosm was becoming stronger at every moment. One-fold, two-fold, three-fold. This time, Lin Feng's medium kiliocosm could expand to his heart's content. Finally, the medium kiliocosm expanded by a total of 13 times before gradually stopping. There's no actual limit at all. Lin Feng slowly opened his eyes. He saw the valley and also the golden flower in the valley. Now, this golden flower had become shriveled again. It seemed like it would only bloom again after hundreds of years. Lin Feng already knew the use of the golden flower. Actually, it did not just expand the medium kiliocosm. Or rather, its true use was not to expand the medium kiliocosm, but to nourish life. This golden flower was closely related to the rule of life, and was the top supreme treasure of life under the rule of life. Lin Feng had never thought that the supreme treasure of life could expand the medium kiliocosm. Could the medium kiliocosm also be a life form? In reality, after fusing the golden liquid, which was actually life energy, Lin Feng gradually understood that the medium kiliocosm was really a life form. However, it was a different kind of life form. In reality, it was not just the medium kiliocosm. Even the small kiliocosm could actually be considered a life form. What were the characteristics of life? It was nothing more than a soul or consciousness. This was very important. As for other things like flesh and blood, they were not important at all. Many life forms were energy in form, but they were indeed types of life form. Back when Lin Feng's world metamorphosed into a small kiliocosm, it actually already possessed its own consciousness. Actually, from that moment on, it was already life. However, the consciousness of a small kiliocosm was very weak. It was only until it metamorphosed into a medium kiliocosm that its consciousness became very powerful. That was equivalent to a soul. Even Lin Feng could sense the consciousness of the medium kiliocosm. However, as Lin Feng was close to the medium kiliocosm, even if the consciousness of the medium kiliocosm grew stronger, the medium kiliocosm would still firmly obey Lin Feng. In fact, the medium kiliocosm and Lin Feng could have been considered one. Lin Feng's consciousness had already fused with the consciousness of the medium kiliocosm. In a sense, Lin Feng was the medium kiliocosm, and the medium kiliocosm was Lin Feng. Then, why couldn't the medium kiliocosm be a life form? Lin Feng's consciousness was his soul. Lin Feng's medium kiliocosm was his body. What was wrong with it? In the past, Lin Feng had fallen into a fixed train of thought. He even had to condense a body to display to others. In reality, there was no need to condense a body at all. The entire medium kiliocosm was Lin Feng's body, and that golden flower was the most nourishing to life forms. Naturally, Lin Feng's medium kiliocosm body expanded. In the past, the reason why he could not expand and had a feeling of reaching his limit was that there was also a limit to life. One needed to break through the shackles to continue growing. Clearly, Lin Feng had relied on the golden flower to break through his shackles and continue to grow. That was why he could continue to expand. As the medium kiliocosm expanded, Lin Feng's river of spacetime was also expanding, and it had expanded by more than 10 times. It was majestic. Even if it was manifested in the origin gate, it would not be completely suppressed by the spacetime rule. At this point, even Lin Feng himself did not know how strong he was. Even peak origin beasts might not be a match for Lin Feng for a single round. Of course, this was under the prerequisite of using the spacetime prison. Overlord-level origin beasts? Perhaps Lin Feng's opponent could only be an Overlord-level origin beast. Or perhaps, Lin Feng was still not a match for the Overlord-level origin beasts. After all, in terms of killing peak origin beasts, even peak Voidwalkers like the Spacetime Swordmaster could do it. Back then, the Spacetime Swordmaster had killed a peak origin beast with a single strike. Lin Feng had never seen the Spacetime Swordmaster before, and he did not know how strong such peak origin beasts were. As for Overlord-level origin beasts, they were even more unheard of. They were only rumored to be very terrifying. Even the combined forces of the top Voidwalkers might not be their match. Lin Feng made up his mind. Perhaps he could go back and spar with the Spacetime Swordmaster. Lin Feng glanced at this golden flower again. In the end, he did not destroy the golden flower. There was no need at all. Moreover, he still had a lot of golden liquid left. It was useless now. If his medium kiliocosm was a life form, now the medium kiliocosm had reached another limit of life. Unless he could find another life energy source stronger than the golden flower, it would not be able to improve anymore. The principle of spacetime, the origin supreme treasures, and the medium kiliocosm. These three were Lin Feng's main methods. But now he had reached a bottleneck in all three. It was already very difficult to continue improving. If there were no special opportunities, he would also be like those peak Voidwalkers, who spent billions of years and countless epochs without any improvement. Perhaps this was why those peak Voidwalkers strived to find the origin realm and enter it. This was because they could no longer improve in the origin gate. What was the point of cultivation that could not improve? It was simply a punishment. Lin Feng did not linger in the Black River Basin. Instead, he left the Black River Basin and returned to Hope City. In Hope City, Lin Feng entered the secret chamber. Although his various methods and strength had reached a bottleneck, he still wanted to see if he could improve further in the principle of spacetime. After all, Lin Feng had obtained a peak spacetime crystal and dozens of powerful spacetime crystals. Perhaps he could give it a try. Hence, Lin Feng entered seclusion again. Spacetime Swordmaster, it's been billions of years since we last met. You're even more elegant than before. A black-robed old man appeared in the void. He was actually using the spacetime power as well. Clearly, his spacetime power was not completely suppressed. The spacetime Swordmaster in white robe opened his eyes. Black Ink Master. Why are you here? To surround and kill that worm, of course. The space-time swordmaster fell into deep thought. The two of us are not enough. The space-time swordmaster was concise. He never spoke superfluous words. What if we include the barbarian godmaster? Still not enough. And the blood sea master? Still not enough. Both parties fell silent. The people the Black Ink Master had mentioned just now were all peak Voidwalkers. Moreover, they were all the strongest among peak Voidwalkers. They could kill peak origin beasts alone. However, the space-time swordmaster determined that they still could not surround and kill that worm. In reality, the Black Ink Master also knew that with their meager strength, there was still no guarantee. However, he was still unwilling to accept it. Space-time Swordmaster, including you, we have a total of 4 peak Voidwalkers. We can all be considered the strongest lineup. Even if we surround and kill that worm, we still have some chance of winning, right? The chance of winning is less than 20%. The Space-time Swordmaster's tone was still cold. Even if it's less than 20%, as long as there's any hope, we can give it a try. Space-time Swordmaster, are you willing to stay trapped in the origin gate forever? The Black Ink Master took a deep breath, and a trace of unwillingness appeared in his eyes. The Space-time Swordmaster looked up at the Black Ink Master. They had surrounded that worm a total of 3 times. However, they failed all 3 times and suffered heavy losses. In fact, a peak Voidwalker had fallen. However, how could he be willing to do nothing? Recently, I had an epiphany and received a future fragment. If we find him, it might improve our chances. Suddenly, the Space-time Swordmaster spoke. Future fragment? The Black Ink Master was stunned for a moment, but then, his expression turned strange. As long as one entered the ranks of the strongest, they would already have comprehended the principle of the future. However, there were countless changes in the future. If they really took the future fragments seriously, they would probably have died countless times over. Are you sure that the future segment is really useful? The Black Ink Master was very doubtful. Let's give it a try. The future segment this time is very interesting. He's someone I've never heard of or seen before. It's very likely that he's the variable. Variable? Your evaluation is too high. The Black Ink Master shook his head. He had also comprehended the principle of the future, so he knew very well what variables meant. Under normal circumstances, even in future fragments, those who could be called variables were all extraordinary. This had nothing to do with strength, but with potential. Hence, even entities like the Black Ink Master and the Space-time Swordmaster could not be considered variables in future fragments. Are you sure he's a variable? The Black Ink Master continued to ask. The Space-time Swordmaster did not look like he was joking. The Space-time Swordmaster did not answer. Instead, he fell silent. The Black Ink Master also understood what the Space-time Swordmaster meant. A variable. It was really a variable. For any variable, no matter what future fragment they sensed, as long as this variable existed, there would be countless turning points in the matter. Actually, back then, before they completely grew into the strongest experts, they were also variables. But now, after they became peak Voidwalkers, they were no longer variables. This meant that their potential had been exhausted, and it was impossible for them to cause any changes. Someone that could become a variable in the future fragments sensed by the Space-time Swordmaster was probably extraordinary. It would naturally be best if they could invite the variable. Space-time Swordmaster, when are you going to invite that variable? There's no time to lose. Let's do it now. The Black Ink Master nodded and simply went with the Space-time Swordmaster. If 2 supreme experts went together, it would also show their sincerity. Moreover, the Black Ink Master was also very curious. Who could become the variable in the Space-time Swordmaster's future fragment? He was also looking forward to seeing them. In the secret chamber, Lin Feng slowly opened his eyes. He had already been in seclusion for decades. However, he gained very little during this period of time. He had even used that peak spacetime crystal. However, that peak spacetime crystal was useless to Lin Feng. Or rather, it was not as useful to Lin Feng as he had imagined. After using the peak spacetime crystal, Lin Feng's principle of spacetime still did not improve by much. In Lin Feng's opinion, the so-called peak spacetime crystal was actually only slightly stronger than the powerful spacetime crystal, and had not reached the level of qualitative change. At Lin Feng's current level of comprehension of the principle of the future, powerful spacetime crystals were completely useless. That was, unless the spacetime crystal could undergo a qualitative change. However, in that case, they probably would not be powerful or peak spacetime crystals. Lin Feng shook his head. Huh! Just as Lin Feng was about to leave the secret chamber and take a look, suddenly some future fragments appeared in his mind. What? Lin Feng had a thought. With his current realm of comprehension of the principle of the future, it was impossible for a future fragment to appear for no reason. Something must have happened, and it must be related to him. Hence, it could trigger Lin Feng to sense future fragments. This kind of ability was somewhat similar to an epiphany, but it was more specific than an epiphany. There were even some specific images. Lin Feng had already comprehended the principle of the future. Hence, he could sense more future fragments in detail. As he slowly sensed them, Lin Feng's eyes also lit up slightly. The space-time swordmaster? Lin Feng muttered softly. He sensed the principle of the future, and many future fragments appeared. However, as expected, a fixed figure appeared in all these future fragments. The space-time swordmaster. No matter how many future fragments Lin Feng sensed, the space-time swordmaster would appear. Hence, Lin Feng speculated that he might come into contact with the space-time swordmaster next. Moreover, something very important would happen, so much so that the space-time swordmaster would always appear in his future fragments. In reality, at Lin Feng's level, he could almost be considered a prophet. Even for people he had never met, as long as he deduced with the principle of the future, he would basically know them in great detail. Hence, although Lin Feng had never met the space-time swordmaster before, he knew that he would definitely meet the space-time swordmaster next. Lin Feng deduced for a few more days. It was still the same. At this moment, two unfamiliar guests arrived at Lin Feng's residence. Lin Feng did not even receive any notice. They went straight to the living room. Swoosh, their eyes met. As soon as Lin Feng entered the living room, he stared intently at a white-robed swordsman. That's right, a swordsman. Lin Feng could tell the sharp sword intent on the other party at a glance. It was daunting and could not be concealed at all. There was only one person who could possess such sword intent. The space-time swordmaster. This white-robed man must be the space-time swordmaster. Moreover, Lin Feng had already met the space-time swordmaster countless times in the future fragments he had sensed. Hence, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. Space-time swordmaster. Chaos master. Now that the two of them had met in person, they must have understood. The two of them must have already sensed the future segment. If the space-time swordmaster still had some doubts previously, now he no longer had any doubts. As soon as he saw Lin Feng, he could sense that Lin Feng had probably comprehended the principle of the future just like him. Both parties sensed each other. With comprehension of the principle of the future, it was impossible to conceal anything. Chaos Master? I didn't expect another peak Voidwalker to appear in Hope City without anyone knowing. At this moment, the Black Ink Master could not help but speak as well. Just like the Spacetime Swordmaster, the moment he saw Lin Feng, he already understood that Lin Feng's realm was not inferior to his and the Spacetime Swordmasters at all. They had all comprehended the principle of the future. No wonder the Spacetime Swordmaster insisted on finding this Chaos Master in front of them, an entity on the same level as them, and a variable at that. This was simply a pleasant surprise. The Black Ink Master was naturally very happy. Black Ink Master? Lin Feng glanced at the Black Ink Master. Lin Feng actually did not know the Black Ink Master before. This was the first time they had met. However, in the future fragments he sensed the Black Ink Master would sometimes appear. Hence, he was also someone who had some interactions with Lin Feng in the future. Spacetime Swordmaster. Black Ink Master. What brings you here? Lin Feng asked calmly. Although he could sense future fragments, fragments were ultimately just fragments. He did not know the ins and outs of the matter. It was impossible for these two peak Voidwalkers, and elders of the Hope Alliance, to come to him for no reason. Then, there must be something very important. Perhaps this matter was the reason the future fragments that Lin Feng had sensed were related to the Black Ink Master and the Spacetime Swordmaster. There's a matter. Of course there's a matter. We won't hide it from the Chaos Master. In reality, we came to you this time because we hope to invite the Chaos Master to join us in surrounding and killing the Hydra, the Black Ink Master said directly. After comprehending the principle of the future, schemes or concealment were useless. He might as well say it directly and not conceal anything. Surround and kill the Hydra? If I'm not wrong, that's an Overlord-level origin beast, right? Lin Feng's expression was slightly stunned. The other party actually wanted to surround and kill an Overlord-level origin beast. This was not an easy matter. Up until now, Lin Feng had never heard of anyone who had successfully surrounded and killed an Overlord-level origin beast. Under normal circumstances, these best Voidwalkers would have no problem killing peak origin beasts alone. However, it would be very difficult to surround and kill an Overlord-level origin beast. That's right. It's an Overlord-level origin beast. In reality, it's not just the two of us. There's also the Barbarian Godmaster and the Blood Sea Master. If the Chaos Master is included, there will be a total of 5 Supreme Experts. In this case, we'll undoubtedly be more confident in surrounding and killing an Overlord-level origin beast. Lin Feng fell into deep thought. After a long while, he asked, "Pardon me for asking, but you are all peak Voidwalkers. Why are you taking the risk to surround and kill an Overlord-level origin beast, and even put yourselves in danger of dying?" This was what puzzled Lin Feng. These were all peak Voidwalkers. Even in the entire Origin Gate, they were actually very safe. But now, they were taking the risk to surround and kill an Overlord-level origin beasts, putting themselves in danger. Why? For what purpose? The Black Ink Master smiled weakly and shook his head. Perhaps the Chaos Master has just comprehended the principle of the future, and has yet to experience our pain. We have already stayed in the Origin Gate for countless epochs, rising step by step from when we were weak to where we are today. Actually, no matter how dangerous it is, we are not afraid. What we are afraid of is not seeing hope. At our realm, how difficult is it to take another step forward? Even peak spacetime crystals are actually useless to us. In reality, we want to surround and kill the Overlord-level origin beast for one purpose, and that is to obtain the Overlord-level spacetime crystal. We just want to see what's so miraculous about the Overlord-level spacetime crystal. Perhaps it can be of help to our realm. Lin Feng was moved. In other words, you're actually doing this for hope? It can even be considered an illusory hope. Hope? That's right. What we seek is hope. Lin Feng fell silent. Hope. They only wished for hope. In reality, Lin Feng was actually planning to reach out to peak Voidwalkers like the Spacetime Swordmaster to see what the path ahead was. Or perhaps Lin Feng wanted to find the Origin Realm or a way to find it. But now it seemed like his hopes had been dashed. How could there be any path ahead? Even if there were, even peak Voidwalkers like the Spacetime Swordmaster and the Black Ink Master did not know. What they had placed their hopes on was actually an Overlord-level origin beast. I'll agree. After a long while, Lin Feng finally made his decision. Perhaps he would obtain an Overlord-level spacetime crystal by following the Black Ink Master and the others this time. Lin Feng was also very curious. How miraculous was an Overlord-level spacetime crystal? Hence, it was not a bad idea to go and take a look this time. This is great. With the Chaos Master accompanying us, we'll be even more confident this time. The Black Ink Master appeared very happy. Although the Spacetime Swordmaster did not say anything, a smile appeared on his lips. He was clearly very satisfied. By the way, if we obtain an Overlord-level spacetime crystal, how should it be distributed? Lin Feng asked. Distribution was also a very important matter. If this was not handled properly, it would be a huge problem and very troublesome. This question is actually very simple. If there's only one spacetime crystal, we'll take turns to study it for a period of time. How about that? This was the method the Black Ink Master and the others came up with. In reality, they had already arranged the distribution method. Lin Feng nodded. Even peak spacetime crystals took a long time to exhaust, let alone an overlord-level spacetime crystal. That must be a huge amount of energy, enough for a few people to take turns to study. Then we'll set off in 3 days. Agreed. The three of them made an agreement. Then, the Spacetime Swordmaster and the Black Ink Master left. In the next 3 days, Lin Feng made another trip to the Meteor Tower to specially purchase some news on the Hydra. However, there was not much information on Overlord-level origin beasts at all. Hence, the Meteor Tower had very little information as well. Lin Feng could only obtain some relatively common information. In reality, it was not of much reference value. They only knew that the Hydra was very, very strong. Even if peak Voidwalkers surrounded and attacked it, it would be difficult to kill it. However, this was not a big deal. Lin Feng still wanted to give it a try and see if his spacetime prison was stronger, or if the Overlord-level origin beast was stronger. 3 days passed in a flash. Lin Feng arrived at the location designated by the Black Ink Master. The Spacetime Swordmaster and the Black Ink Master were already waiting here. Lin Feng greeted the two of them respectively, then waited quietly. Soon, the Barbarian God Master and the Blood Sea Master also arrived. When they saw Lin Feng, surprise appeared in their eyes. Although the Black Ink Master had disclosed some news to them in advance, they were still very surprised to see Lin Feng with their own eyes. Lin Feng was not famous previously, but now he had squeezed into the top circle at once. This could be considered a stunning feat, Chaos Master. I didn't expect the Chaos Master to amaze the world with a single feat and comprehend the principle of the future. Congratulations. The two peak Voidwalkers also greeted Lin Feng in a friendly manner. They were all supreme experts. No one was stupid enough to offend a peak Voidwalker casually. Moreover, no expert who could comprehend the principle of the future was weak. Hence, from the beginning, they had treated Lin Feng as an entity at the same level with equal status. All 5 peak Voidwalkers had already arrived. The Black Ink Master said confidently, "This is the 4th time we are surrounding and killing the Hydra. We failed the first 3 times and even suffered some losses. However, with the Chaos Master joining us this time, I believe we'll definitely succeed." Although they had already failed 3 times, the Black Ink Master and the others still did not give up. "All right. If no one has any questions, let's go." The 5 peak Voidwalkers could actually all use spacetime power to warp. However, Lin Feng had never been to the place where the Hydra was, so he could not set the location. Hence, this time, everyone flew in the direction of the Hydra. The Hydra was undoubtedly an Overlord-level origin beast. If a peak Voidwalker encountered them in a one-on-one battle, the peak Voidwalker would have a very high chance of dying. The reason was very simple. Overlord-level origin beasts had a special life field. Once this kind of life field spread in the special environment of the origin gate, it could even seal spacetime. In other words, even if one could mobilize spacetime power, they would not be able to warp spacetime. This was the terrifying aspect of the Overlord-level origin beast. In reality, there used to be far more Voidwalkers in the origin gate than now, especially peak Voidwalkers. Having comprehended the principle of the future and being able to warp spacetime, logically speaking, they were almost invincible. However, in reality, many of those peak Voidwalkers had also died. They had actually died at the hands of those Overlord-level origin beasts. Hence, it was rather dangerous to deal with Overlord-level origin beasts. The Hydra Mountain is ahead. That worm is inside. It's slumbering all year round and almost never leaves this place. The Black Ink Master and the others stopped. They had already arrived at Hydra Mountain. Lin Feng sensed a terrifying aura from afar, and it even formed a suppression on him from the depths of his soul. It was a suppression in the level of life. In other words, in terms of the level of life, Overlord-level origin beasts were actually stronger than Void Overlords like them. How terrifying was that? This was the first time Lin Feng had approached an Overlord-level origin beast. He was also very shocked. "Why did you choose the Hydra?" Lin Feng asked in a low voice. "It's very simple. The Hydra will almost never leave the Hydra Mountain. We don't have to search hard for its location, and we can make some arrangements in advance. In fact, even if we escape, as long as we leave the range of the Hydra, it won't hunt us down. Hence, Overall, the Hydra be considered the easiest Overlord-level origin beast to kill. The Black Ink Master explained. However, the others all sighed. They had tried everything, and still failed to kill this Overlord-level origin beast that was evaluated as the easiest to kill. In fact, they suffered heavy losses every time they surrounded and attacked it. Some peak Voidwalkers even fell. This time, as usual, we'll attack together and surround and attack the Hydra. I hope everyone will use their full strength and not hold back. The Black Ink Master glanced at the other 4 peak Voidwalkers, and his gaze lingered on Lin Feng for a while longer. He was the initiator of this operation. In reality, he was also the one who initiated the first 3 operations, only for them to end in defeat every time. This time, they were joined by the Chaos Master. The Spacetime Swordmaster even thought very highly of Lin Feng, calling him a variable. Naturally, the Black Ink Master would also place some hope on Lin Feng. Hence, everyone approached silently. From 1,000 miles, 100 miles, 10 miles, when the 5 of them were already 10 miles away from the Hydra, Lin Feng finally saw the true appearance of the Hydra. It was as massive as a mountain. The 9 huge heads hung to the ground, their eyes closed, as if they were snoring in a deep sleep. However, as the 5 of them arrived, the Hydra seemed to have sensed something. Its 9 heads began to shake slowly, as if they were about to open their eyes. The Black Ink Master shouted, "The Hydra is about to wake up. Attack!" Swish, in the next moment, Lin Feng felt a terrifying sharpness, as if it could even slice through spacetime. Of course, this was an illusion. Spacetime would not be severed, but space could definitely be severed. Sword Aura. A supreme sword aura that contains spacetime. This was the sword of the Spacetime Swordmaster. Lin Feng had always heard legends of the Spacetime Swordmaster. He had even personally sensed the Spacetime Sword Aura. It was the sword aura left behind by the Spacetime Swordmaster for sale. However, how could the sword auras for sale be comparable to the true Spacetime Sword Aura? Now, Lin Feng saw the Spacetime Swordmaster attack. His sword was a silvery white sword that looked very simple and unadorned. It was only a peak origin supreme treasure, and there was actually nothing special about it. In fact, this was the only peak origin supreme treasure the Spacetime Swordmaster had on him. However, once such a peak origin treasure erupted, even Lin Feng felt his heart palpitate. Boundless Blood Sea. The Blood Sea Master also attacked. His supreme treasure of origin was a supreme treasure that contained infinite blood. The endless sea of blood was almost infinite. As long as the sea of blood was not dry, he would not die. In terms of life-preserving ability, the Blood Sea Master could be considered the strongest. Hence, an incomparable sword aura and a massive sea of blood slashed straight at the Hydra. Crunch. When the sea of blood collided fiercely with the Hydra, shaking its massive body, the terrifying sword aura of the Spacetime Swordmaster also severed one of its heads at once. A huge wound was left on its head. Unfortunately, they still could not cut off one of its heads. Moreover, so what if they could decapitate it? The regenerative ability of the Hydra was unparalleled. In the blink of an eye, its previous injuries had all recovered. There was also the Barbarian Godmaster. When he manifested his true form, he was actually an indomitable and majestic giant. He struck the Hydra violently, his huge palm blasting the Hydra with a terrifying force. Even the Hydra was smashed into the ground at once. There was also the Black Ink Master. A black light flashed on his body and instantly burrowed into the wound of the Hydra. It was unknown what effect it had, but in short, the Hydra roared, appearing very furious. When Lin Feng saw these peak Voidwalkers attack, he only had one feeling, and that was that they were strong. They were really strong. Even Lin Feng would probably be doomed if he was surrounded and attacked by these 4 peak Voidwalkers. The top Voidwalkers had all comprehended the principle of the future, and could be considered the strongest. They stood at the peak of cultivators in the origin gate. How could such experts be ordinary? Of course, Lin Feng was not idle. He also attacked. A few peak origin supreme treasures appeared on his body, such as the 9-layered gloves, the blood flame lamp, and so on. Terrifying flames burned the Hydra. The immense power of the 9-layered gloves also constantly bombarded the Hydra. But what was the use? Their attacks could only repel the Hydra again and again, and could only enrage the Hydra over and over. As for killing it, that was impossible. Even injuring it was out of reach. On the other hand, the Hydra was completely enraged. Its body began to expand rapidly, and its 9 heads roared at the sky. A faint green light appeared on its body. In the blink of an eye, it had already enveloped an area of billions of miles. Life field. Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He had long heard the Black Ink Master instructions to be careful of the life field. Once the life field enveloped them, it would be impossible to warp spacetime again. Moreover, once one was enveloped by the life field, they would be suppressed by the level of life. Lin Feng had never come into contact with the life field, but now he sensed it. The life field of the Hydra was simply too powerful. As soon as it descended, Lin Feng felt as if his soul was trembling, and the strength in his entire body was greatly diminished at once. Even if the Black Ink Master, the Spacetime Swordmaster, and the others were prepared, it would still be the same case. At most, they would be able to adapt faster than Lin Feng. As soon as the Hydra's life field appeared, the situation was immediately reversed. The 5 peak Voidwalkers were suppressed at once and fell into danger. The Hydra began to have the upper hand. It's the life field again. Damn it! If we can't break the life field, what's the use? So what if we break the life field? The life field of the Hydra covers billions of miles. The speed is not slow either. How can we break it? Of course, there was actually another way, and that was to go all out and shatter a hole in the life field. This way they could escape. However, what was the point of escaping? They were here to try and see if they could kill the Hydra. If they escaped, it would mean that they had failed again. This was not their purpose for coming here. If they really wanted to escape, all 5 peak Voidwalkers had their trump cards. Even if the Hydra wanted to kill them, it would not be so easy. Boom! The Hydra's body continued to expand. It seemed to be really enraged. In reality, the advantage of the Hydra was very obvious. It had an almost undying body and invincible power, as well as a light field that suppressed spacetime power. With these 3 methods, it was almost invincible. As for defense, the defense of the Hydra was not strong. Previously, both the Spacetime Swordmaster and the Black Ink Master could injure the Hydra. However, the Hydra's regenerative ability was strong. While its defense was not strong and it could be injured, it could recover in the blink of an eye. So what if its defense was not strong? Facing such a Hydra, even peak Voidwalkers would also despair. As for strength, bang! The huge head of the Hydra blew fiercely at the Black Ink Master. That's right, it merely blew. The Black Ink Master's expression changed drastically. He even used other peak origin supreme treasures. They were defensive, but he could only barely hold out. As the Hydra approached, its huge head smashed hard. The Black Ink Master was sent flying. Invincible! Such power was almost invincible. Lin Feng's expression was very dark. Faced with such a terrifying beast, the Black Ink Master had actually surrounded and attacked it again and again. This was even the 4th time he had surrounded and attacked the Hydra. Could it be that they were not prepared? Had they rashly come to surround and attack it just like that? Lin Feng did not believe it. How could the Black Ink Master actually come to surround and attack the Hydra again just with these methods? Lin Feng glanced at the Spacetime Swordmaster and said in a low voice, "Spacetime Swordmaster, if you have any methods, use them as soon as possible. Otherwise, there won't be time." The Spacetime Swordmaster nodded and said, "All right." The Spacetime Swordmaster was a man of few words. Lin Feng himself came due to the Spacetime Swordmaster's insistence on inviting him. Hence, the Spacetime Swordmaster trusted Lin Feng quite a lot. Moreover, in this situation they had to do something. Otherwise, this siege would clearly still end in failure. Swoosh! At this moment, Master Black Ink had already returned. He had the protection of a peak origin supreme treasure. Although he was at a disadvantage, it was still impossible for the Hydra to kill the Black Ink Master in an instant. The Black Ink Master expression was dark as he looked at this huge Hydra. This could be considered their old friend. Attack! The next moment, the four top Voidwalkers retreated all of a sudden. At the same time, the Black Ink Master suddenly threw out a Peak Origin Supreme Treasure. However, Lin Feng saw that this Peak Origin Supreme Treasure seemed to be broken. It looked like a gray sphere, and it was badly damaged. What was the use of bringing this Peak Origin Supreme Treasure? But the next moment, Lin Feng understood the goal of the Black Ink Master and the others. The four Peak Voidwalkers, the Black Ink Master, the Space-Time Sword Master, the Barbarian God Master, and the Blood Sea Master, all infused their power into this broken Peak Origin Supreme Treasure. Lin Feng's eyes widened. He sensed that the aura inside this broken Peak Origin Supreme Treasure seemed to be very unstable. All kinds of strange powers were constantly entangled and conflicting, as if they would explode at any moment. However, the Peak Origin Supreme Treasure firmly suppressed all this power and maintained itself. Still, the four Peak Voidwalkers continued infusing power. They are preparing to detonate a Peak Origin Supreme Treasure? Lin Feng revealed a shocked expression. He vaguely sensed that the purpose of these four Peak Voidwalkers was to detonate a Peak Origin Supreme Treasure. But how was this possible? As everyone knew, Peak Origin Supreme Treasures could not be destroyed at all. Even a collision between a Peak Origin Supreme Treasure and another Peak Origin Supreme Treasure could not destroy a Peak Origin Supreme Treasure. No power could destroy a Peak Origin Supreme Treasure. Many Peak Voidwalkers were dead, but their Peak Origin Supreme Treasures were still left behind. Even Lin Feng had tried and used all kinds of methods. Indeed, he could not destroy a Peak Origin Supreme Treasure. But now, the Black Ink Master and the others actually wanted to rely on the strange energy between the four of them to detonate a Peak Origin Supreme Treasure. Was this possible? Chaos Master, please hold back the Hydra. We will do our best to detonate this Peak Origin Supreme Treasure. The Black Ink Master sent a voice transmission to Lin Feng. The situation was critical now. If it was not restrained, the Hydra would arrive soon. At that time, they would be in trouble. They would not be able to detonate this Peak Origin Supreme Treasure at all. However, Lin Feng was confused. Can a Peak Origin Supreme Treasure be detonated? Lin Feng expressed his doubts. Definitely not a complete Peak Origin Supreme Treasure, but for some reason, this Peak Origin Supreme Treasure is actually broken. We've tested it before. We are 60 to 70% confident that we can detonate it. You are 60 to 70% confident? Lin Feng was a little speechless. How could they only be 60 to 70% confident in such an important matter? However, at this point, he had no choice but to hold off the Hydra with all his might. Fortunately, although the Hydra was strong, Lin Feng could contend with it by relying on the 5 Peak Origin Supreme Treasures, even without using the Spacetime Prison. Finally, Lin Feng felt that the Peak Origin Supreme Treasure was a little unstable. Perhaps it was time to detonate it. Detonate! As the Black Ink Master shouted, strange sounds seemed to come from within the broken Peak Origin Supreme Treasure. Traces of cracks even appeared on the surface of the Supreme Treasure. These cracks quickly expanded, densely covering the entire Origin Supreme Treasure. In the next moment, strange powers erupted instantly, causing the Origin Supreme Treasure to shake violently. Boom! It exploded. This broken Peak Origin Supreme Treasure finally could not hold out anymore. A large amount of strange energy instantly poured out of the cracks. The entire Origin Supreme Treasure was instantly blasted into pieces. Lin Feng fled in a frenzy immediately. However, even so, he was still affected by the shockwave from the explosion of the Origin Supreme Treasure. A terrifying force struck his body. Fortunately, he had already fled some distance in advance. Despite the force of the shockwave, with the defense of a few Peak Origin Supreme Treasures, it could not kill him. As for being injured, that was even simpler. As long as Lin Feng's medium kiliocosm was not destroyed, forget about being injured, even the destruction of his entire body would be nothing. Lin Feng fled far away and looked at the huge Hydra. In such a terrifying explosion, even the life field was on the verge of collapse, let alone an Overlord-level Origin beast. Lin Feng did not even believe that any life form could withstand such a terrifying explosion. However, Lin Feng keenly realized that the life field had not disappeared. This was very abnormal. If the Hydra was dead, how could there still be a life field? Lin Feng was not the only one who discovered it. The Black Ink Master, the Spacetime Swordmaster, and the others clearly discovered it as well. As long as the life field did not disappear, the Hydra was not dead. Gore! As expected. As the dust settled, everyone heard a furious roar, filled with infinite anger and killing intent. The figure of the Hydra gradually became clearer. Everyone could see the appearance of the Hydra clearly. At this moment, the Hydra looked very disheveled. Its massive body was already in tatters, and its flesh and blood were flying everywhere. Even though it was constantly recovering, it could not recover in a short period of time. A total of 5 heads were even blasted off, and these 5 heads did not regrow for a long time. Seeing this scene, everyone's heart sank. The Black Ink Master's expression was very dark. In the end, he shook his head and sighed. Although we severely injured the Hydra, we still couldn't kill it. The Hydra has 9 heads, which means it practically has 9 lives. Now that only 5 heads are gone, this also means that when the Origin Supreme Treasure exploded just now, it had already killed the Hydra 5 times. Unfortunately, we still couldn't do anything to the Hydra. The Black Ink Master and the others had already done their best. Although the facts had proven that detonating the Origin Supreme Treasure was feasible and could kill an Overlord-level Origin beast, it was far from enough to kill the Hydra 9 times at once. They had only killed the Hydra 5 times. In other words, the Hydra still had a total of 4 more lives. They could no longer find a second Broken Peak Origin Supreme Treasure. Otherwise, if they had a second Broken Peak Origin Supreme Treasure, they would probably be confident of killing the Hydra completely. From the looks of it, we can't do anything to the Hydra. Let's leave, the Black Ink Master said. They had already used their trump cards. Unfortunately, it was still useless. Now that the life field had been greatly weakened, they could leave at any time. However, they were still unwilling to leave just like that. But so what if they were unwilling? They could not do anything to the Hydra currently. Wait! Suddenly, Lin Feng spoke. Lin Feng looked meaningfully at the Spacetime Swordmaster and the others. Finally, he said in a low voice, "Everyone, I have a method that might be worth a try. However, I might need everyone's cooperation." The Chaos Master has a way to kill the Hydra? The Black Ink Master was slightly stunned, as if he could not quite believe it. The 4 Peak Voidwalkers had already gone all out. They had tried everything they could, but still could not do anything to the Hydra. What could Lin Feng, even the Spacetime Swordmaster, was a little confused. Even though he had seen something extraordinary about Lin Feng in the future fragments were just future fragments, and could not be equated to reality. After all, there were countless possibilities in the future, and nothing was certain at all. There's a way, but I'm not too confident either, so I can only give it a try. It depends on if everyone dares to take the risk. Lin Feng said calmly. What way? As long as there's a trace of hope, we won't give up. The Black Ink Master's heart immediately burned with passion. In fact, it was not just the Black Ink Master. It was the same for the other Peak Voidwalkers. They were unwilling to miss even a trace of hope. Otherwise, they would not have taken the risk to surround and attack the Hydra. The solution is very simple. I need to use a special Origin Supreme Treasure, but I need time to mobilize it. Moreover, for this Supreme Treasure to kill the Hydra, we must prevent the Hydra from resisting violently. In other words, you have to go all out to suppress this Hydra. Suppress the Hydra? The expressions of the Black Ink Master and the others changed slightly. Everyone knew how terrifying the Hydra was. How difficult was it to suppress the Hydra? If one was not careful, they might even fall. Hence, everyone appeared a little hesitant. Chaos Master, how confident are you? The Black Ink Master asked. He was weighing the pros and cons to see if there was a need to take the risk. After all, this was not a small matter. They were all Peak Voidwalkers and might fall. If there was no hope at all, who would take the risk? Lin Feng pondered for a moment and said, If you can really suppress the Hydra, I'm more than 70% confident that I can kill it. 70%. The Black Ink Master's eyes lit up. He had thought that he would take the risk if there was a 30% to 40% chance. Who would have thought that Lin Feng actually had a 70% chance of killing the Hydra? This was simply a pleasant surprise. He now understood somewhat why the Spacetime Swordmaster had sensed future fragments of Lin Feng. Lin Feng was probably their turning point. Spacetime Swordmaster, what do you think? The Black Ink Master did not agree immediately. Instead, he looked at the Spacetime Swordmaster and the others. Good. The Spacetime Swordmaster was still concise. The Blood Sea Master and the Barbarian God Master both nodded solemnly. Clearly, they agreed to take the risk. Hence, the Black Ink Master took a deep breath and said to Lin Feng in a low voice, Chaos Master, we've all agreed. We'll do as you say. However, the Hydra is no small matter. Even if we can suppress it, it'll probably last only a few breaths. 3 breaths are enough. Lin Feng's words made the Black Ink Master nod. Even if they had to risk their lives, they had to suppress the Hydra for 3 breaths time and by Lin Feng time. Everyone, let's risk it. A trace of determination appeared in the Black Ink Master's eyes. The Black Ink Master was the first to attack. This time, he was really going all out. In fact, it was not just the Black Ink Master. The Spacetime Swordmaster, the Blood Sea Master, and the Barbarian God Master all did the same. They no longer thought of holding back or leaving. Instead, they really went all out. Each used their own abilities to sweep towards the Hydra. Once the 4 top Voidwalkers went all out, even an Overlord-level origin beast like the Hydra would be firmly suppressed for a while. However, it would only be suppressed for a short period of time. Once time passed, these 4 peak Voidwalkers would probably really be in danger. Lin Feng knew that time was tight. He had to give it his all. Buzz. With a thought from Lin Feng, a dazzling river of spacetime appeared in the void. 1 breath! The Black Ink Master shouted. The 4 of them had already suppressed the Hydra tightly. The Spacetime Swordmaster's sword aura slashed at the Hydra in a frenzy, exhausting it. Even though its restorative ability was very strong, the flurry of Spacetime sword auras still restrained one of the heads. It was the same for the Black Ink Master. His wisp of black light was like deep darkness, enveloping the second head of the Hydra tightly. It made the Hydra's head roar wildly, but there was nothing it could do. There was also the Barbarian God Master. He had even transformed into an indomitable giant. His enormous hands forcefully wrapped around the third head of the Hydra with infinite power. No matter how the Hydra struggled, he refused to let go. There was also the Blood Sea Master. He had also transformed into a sea of blood and firmly suppressed the 4th head of the Hydra. The Hydra had a total of 9 heads, and every head represented a life. The Broken Peak Origin's supreme treasure just now had already blasted 5 heads off the Hydra, leaving only 4 heads. But now, with the desperate efforts of the 4 peak Voidwalkers, the Spacetime Swordmaster, the Black Ink Master, the Blood Sea Master, and the Barbarian God Master, its remaining 4 heads were also firmly trapped. This was an opportunity that could not be missed. 2 breaths. 2 breaths had passed since the 4 peak Voidwalkers attacked, and now they were holding off the Hydra tightly. Although the 4 peak Voidwalkers had already trapped the Hydra, how could they keep trapping it? They could only trap it for a short period of time at most. The time Lin Feng had set for them was 3 breaths, and now a full 2 breaths had passed. Splash. At this moment, a massive long river, emitting infinite spacetime power, appeared above the Hydra in the void. Moreover, there was a beehive-like supreme treasure standing quietly in the river. The Spacetime Prison. This was the Spacetime Prison. The River of Spacetime. The Black Ink Master muttered softly. They were all Voidwalkers who had comprehended the principle of the future. How could they not know about the River of Spacetime? In fact, if they wanted to, they could also mobilize their River of Spacetime. However, what was the use of the River of Spacetime at this moment? There's not much time left. The Black Ink Master's expression turned into a grimace. He was almost at his limit of suppressing the Hydra. 3 breaths. Finally, 3 breaths had passed. The Black Ink Master, the Spacetime Sword Master, the Blood Sea Master, and the Barbarian God Master had almost reached their limit. They could no longer suppress the Hydra. If Lin Feng still did not take action, this operation might fail. In fact, the four of them would all be severely injured. Space-time prison. Suppress. Finally, Lin Feng opened his eyes. He was already sufficiently prepared. He immediately activated the space-time prison. Immediately, the space-time prison descended. Rumble as the space-time prison descended. A terrifying space-time power suppressed the Hydra wildly. The space-time domain only had a radius of 19 meters. However, the immense pressure endured within this 10-meter radius was extraordinary. Lin Feng's space-time prison even enveloped the four Voidwalkers. Of course, it could not envelope everything. Still, even though it only enveloped a portion, it still made the four Voidwalkers feel a trace of solemnity. However, Lin Feng's focus was still on the Hydra. Gore! It was as if he could already feel the heavy pressure. The Hydra began to struggle violently. Its four heads were suppressed heavily. Even if the four Voidwalkers tried their best, they could no longer suppress it. Everyone, you've already done your job perfectly. You can retreat now. Boom! Finally, the four peak Voidwalkers retreated rapidly. They had long wanted to leave, but while Lin Feng had not used the spacetime prison, they could only hold out desperately. Fortunately, Lin Feng attacked in the end. As the four peak Voidwalkers retreated, the Hydra regained its mobility. However, even without the four peak Voidwalkers, there was the spacetime prison. Pressed down on the Hydra like a huge mountain. Even Lin Feng's expression was incomparably solemn now. Even he could not guarantee that he could suppress the Hydra. He could only barely give it a try. Fortunately, with the suppression of the four peak Voidwalkers previously, the spacetime prison was very close to the Hydra. Moreover, the 10-meter spacetime domain had already enveloped a portion of the Hydra's heads. At the same time, terrifying spacetime power erupted from the spacetime prison. It was like a huge net that wrapped around the Hydra, constantly tugging at it. When the Black Ink Master, the Spacetime Sword Master, and the others saw this scene, they were all very surprised. They were also experienced and knowledgeable people. When had they ever seen such a peak origin supreme treasure that contained spacetime power? Moreover, unlike ordinary peak origin supreme treasures, this supreme treasure seemed to have spacetime power as its foundation. On top of that, it was very powerful. Could even suppress the Hydra. Even though 5 of the Hydra's heads had already been blasted off now, and its strength was no longer at its peak, no matter what, it was still an overlord-level origin beast. Even if the 4 of them risked their lives, they could only hold it off for the span of 3 breaths. But now, Lin Feng could actually restrain or even suppress the Hydra just by relying on the spacetime prison. They could not help but be awed. However, they could also tell that Lin Feng was under a lot of pressure now. The two parties seemed to have entered a deadlock, and the spacetime prison could not suppress the Hydra further. Similarly, the Hydra could not break free from the suppression of the spacetime prison. It seemed that both parties were in a complete stalemate. This stalemate urgently required a power to break the balance. Spacetime Sword Master, Black Ink Master, Barbarian God Master, Blood Sea Master. Please lend me your aid and attack together to suppress the Hydra, Lin Feng shouted. Clearly, he had also reached his limit. He could only activate the spacetime prison with all his might, and no longer had time to care about anything else. He needed the help of the spacetime Sword Master and the others.